Yeah, so I first visited Gaza 2 years ago. It was the first time I ever met my extended family, my cousins, my uncles, my aunties, and my grandma as well, who actually on the day that we arrived to Gaza, so the journey there, it took us 3 days to get there from Egypt by via minivan,
Mm.
with like five, six other families or whatever. We'd have to cross the border, wait, sleep in the car overnight, sleep in the minivan overnight, no toilet facilities or anything. So for 3 days we were kind of in this car moving slowly. And keep in mind it's like a 6 hour journey from like what Cairo to Gaza, but you know, the
Mm.
amount of checks, security, etc.
Yeah.
So it was a very long process. But when we got there actually it was all of that all of the effort we put in, like it was all worth it. You know, our cousins, they printed this big poster with our pictures on it and everything. They welcomed us. They had this thing called a zephyr, which basically like in any wedding or any celebration what you have is like a kind of convoy of cars that go about and like beep their horns and play music and whatever. So it was a very kind of it felt like going home. That's what it felt like. My grandma actually was the day that we arrived was the final day that she ever lived as well.
Really.
So we say it's as if it was her soul waiting for us to actually, to see us before she passed. And I'm glad, we had the opportunity as well to kind of sit down with family and see them. But currently, right now, I've been speaking with cousins, I've been speaking with uncles on a daily basis. And it just, every conversation, it just seems like I won't have like it it's hard to accept. I don't want to be in a position where I'm saying next week or next month or tonight or something, I'm not going to be able to speak to my cousin. Like I just can't bear to like accept that. Like that's it's a crazy situation. And it's like imagine just kind of, I guess, like being in that position where you can't really affect change, or I can't take them out of there. Like I want to be able to put my hand out for my cousins and be like, hey guys, look, I'm here. But I can't. Like
It must be such a helpless feeling, and I think that like reiterates these are actual human beings. These are innocent people just living in Gaza. These aren't just numbers on a screen, because I think it's so easy to just view it as that, as you see the death count going up and you just see numbers. It's so far removed. But when you hear stories like yours, these are people with families. They're human beings. This is it can't be justified at all,
yeah,
in my opinion.
yeah, no, 100%. And that's part of what I think, like the importance of media is in terms of like representation, etc. Like people don't know what it's like to be a Palestinian, and we don't expect them to understand it, but they don't empathize with being a Palestinian. Like they see us in this kind of little space where we just kind of want to create chaos. Apparently that's what the narrative is, and that's not the reality. We're under pressure for however many years. Our homes, my home, my home was taken from me. I can't go and live on the beach that my grandfather lived in. I can't go and enjoy the Mosim. The Mosim is like a season. It's kind of like a yearly festival. My family, we used to have a festival every year where people from across different countries around the Levant or wherever would come and trade food, clothes, dance, etc. I want to be able to enjoy that Mosim. What's the reason for me not being able to do that? Like the mosque that my grandparents used to go to, the minaret, the tall tower that used to be built there, that's been demolished now, for however many years. I look at pictures of the village that I should have grown up in, and I see it's a completely different area, and I am not welcome there. That doesn't make sense to me. Life in Gaza, no work. The highest unemployment rate in the world. This is before everything that's happening now. Most people, 40% or between 40 to 60% of people unemployed, sitting around doing nothing. So imagine, for example, a population where you have loads of young people. So the average age is like 18, 19, for example. You have loads of young people who go to university. So it has the highest or one of the highest literacy rates in the world, actually, Gaza does. They go to university, they get the degree, they get really high grades, but then what do they do with that? They can't get a job, really, unless maybe if they work in computers, for example, and they use the internet to overcome physical barriers so then they can make money. Maybe that's the case, but consider who is digitally literate, for example, and then consider as well, like, who has the ability, the finances, the time to even be able to operate on a digital basis. So life in Gaza, when I went, I enjoyed it. But the thing is, I was there for a month and a half. I could never, I couldn't, after the first month even, you know, I was getting fed up of hearing the drone constantly, the Zanana in the sky, you know, this drone that uses facial recognition technology and that can blow you up at any moment. You hear it in the sky constantly, zzz, and you just think to yourself, am I going to go now or what? That's what life in Gaza is like, really. You're just always thinking to yourself, or I was always thinking to myself, when is it going to happen? When am I going to go? I was at this event like 2 weeks ago, and this young Palestinian who's actually quite known, Jenna Jihad, she was speaking. She's 17 years old, right? And she was giving an insight into her life, I think in the West Bank. She was talking about getting to school, and it's a 20-minute drive. But for her to get there, it takes 2 hours, 3 hours because of the amount of checkpoints. Sometimes she wouldn't even get to school because of the checkpoints. Sometimes she'd be at school, the sirens would go off or something along those lines, and then sometimes she'd be in the compound, and then the Israeli force would come in and just blast music out loud just to disturb the people. All the little kids would run terrified. The big monsters here. What's happening? They come in, they just terrorize the village. For what reason? I can tell you from personal experience. When I was in Gaza, the last day that I was there, it was the third day of the Gaza war in 2021. And although for the past 90 days, or not 90 days, although for the past like month and a half, which is 45 days, maths, although for the past 45 days, we used to hear every morning the F-16s flying up in the sky, like whoosh, flying around, whoosh, and the Zanana constantly zzz, you'd see the walls with the guns pointing towards you, etc. Obviously, you never got that close to the border. But on the final day, it was the first time that I actually saw the F-16 in the sky flying. There were bombings everywhere. Of course, I was afraid for my life. I was in the middle of all of it. We saw the rockets going up. My brother has a video of like the bombs coming down as well. And there was a pilot who decided what he was going to do was he was flying this way. I was sitting on this bench with like 3 of my other cousins. We're talking about, when it's like the last day of school and you're kind of like with your boys and you're talking. It's kind of like that, really. I'm not going to see you for a while. Maybe I'm never going to see you again, you know. But the point is this F-16 pilot flying in the sky, and we're just looking up. I'm looking up. I'm like, I'm bricking it, you know. They're kind of used to it at this point. They're like, of course they're afraid, but like they control their emotions. But I'm like looking up. I'm like, what's happening? I see it. What it does, it passes, and then it turns back around. So imagine it turns back around and it's right above our heads, slows down. I can tell you this, like I remember it like frame by frame. Like it goes, turns around, slows down right above our heads. I say my shahada. I say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And it just flashes white. Boof! Big bang. I can't do anything in that moment. Yeah. I'm stuck in this moment in time. Big, white, bright light in front of me. This plane that in 2 seconds just turned around and just decided to whatever. I thought I was gone. Turns out he was just playing with us. Big joke. Haha, lol. I'm just gonna scare these little kids to death. But I was shaking. Even to this day, I hear aeroplanes. I think I'm gonna get bombed. Like I genuinely believe that, like, I hear bangs outside and I'm like, I say my shahada. Like, this is me as someone that's grown up in the UK, that went to Palestine once, that sat with family for like a month and a half, that experienced the bombing once. And I'm here hearing planes and I'm like, that's me. How am I getting PTSD from that? Bro, I remember walking back into the family house after all of that, because there's bombings everywhere and everyone's kind of like, you know, it's that kind of, is it my time now? So I go back in, and one of my older cousins, he holds me by the shoulder. He's like, Bilal, you good? You right? What he basically does is he jitters or whatever. He like starts pretending that like something's about to fall on my head. And it was the best thing
Just
for me.
to make
It was
light of this.
Make it light,
yeah, that kind of attitude. We're about to die. Lol. Okay. Is what it is. At the end of the day, it is just the dunya. I believe that there is an akhirah. And this is the second thing that I usually tell people about my visit in Gaza. But like what I asked my cousins, the first one being, the kickboxing. The second one being, I asked my cousin, give me a stereotype of people in the West. What do you think? And he said, people in the West are afraid of death. And that really resonated again. If we go back to the idea of like materialistic, etc., or whatever. But then consider this young man in Gaza saying these words, I am not afraid of death. That's the reality you have to accept. If you're afraid of death, you won't be able to operate in Gaza. You won't be able to get up out of bed.